With all the problems that we're having with condos, particularly in Florida, you have different people kind of handling this a different way, both financially and emotionally. And I saw something interesting that I really couldn't believe, but at the same time, you can believe it because people are just kind of so overwhelmed with the situation that they kind of just don't make logical decisions. You know, when you're under a lot of pressure and you're under a lot of stress in life, sometimes you just don't think straight. And this is the perfect example of it. Because in this story, they talk to a property manager that deals with different condo buildings in Miami. And some of these condo boards are just flat out saying that they are not going to comply with these new condo guidelines when it comes to needing to have full reserves, when it comes to all of the structural reserve studies and all of the work that might need to be done in the building. They're saying, you know what, we're not going to do any of this stuff. These condo board members are saying to the property managers, like, find a way around this because we're not going to comply, and I don't care what you tell them, but we're just not going to do it. And what I'm referring to is that any Florida condo that's at least 3 stories tall and was built before July of 2022 is required to complete a structural integrity reserve study by December 31st of this year, guys. So the clock is quickly running out. And what this reserve study does is it basically takes a look at the building and tries to determine all of the work that would be necessary to keep the building in tip-top shape and give a budget estimate of how much all of that would cost. And then however much the building is short in terms of that budget, they need to now start building that reserve so that way they have that money for the future. By the way, I'm walking past Desert Willow Golf Resort here in Palm Desert, California. For sure the last California video, because today I'm driving to Arizona. But even for the buildings that do want to comply with these new regulations, it's very difficult because there's just not enough engineers and architects and reserve specialists to go around. And there's about 28,250 condo associations in the state of Florida with over 1.2 million units. Just in South Florida alone, like Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County, there are 13,000 condo associations and 610,000 condos. So literally half of all of the condos in the state of Florida are just in this small pocket of South Florida. And apparently what a lot of these board members are thinking that are not going to comply with these new laws is they think that at the last minute somehow the governor, Ron DeSantis, will call a special session to the state legislature or issue some order that provides relief for associations. Now, I'm not saying that that's impossible. In fact, I think this is actually a highly likely scenario. At what type of relief and to what extent, I don't know. But you know there's going to be thousands of these buildings that are in non-compliance with this because there's already people telling you that they're not going to comply. So I'm pretty sure they're serious and they're not going to. Now, obviously the state government will have to do something if there's just not enough people complying. You know, they're going to have to either make extensions, make exceptions, impose fines, maybe even shut down buildings that refuse to comply and deem them unsafe to be inhabited if they don't want to pay for the studies on their own. I don't know exactly what they're going to do. They've already been shutting down buildings that have been deemed unsafe, but usually that happens because someone makes a report or a complaint about something that they see in the building, and then it will get checked out, and then a lot of other additional problems will be uncovered as a result of that. So this is something else that you can see happen as well. But it's not like the buildings that are being condemned because of this problem. It usually stems from a smaller problem that's reported, then all of a sudden bigger problems are noticed, and then the building's condemned. They also talked to an attorney who works with some of these condo associations who are saying that they're not going to comply with this. And he believes what's going to happen is that you're going to see criminal consequences for these condo association board members who refuse to adhere to the revised condo law. Because when you're a board member of a condo, you're taking on that responsibility to serve in the best interest of the condo and its unit owners. And by willfully disobeying the law, you are now putting yourself in a position where you might face criminal charges. Another likely outcome for these board members and condo associations that don't comply with the laws is that they could be potentially placed into receivership, where a court-appointed representative seizes the management control of the community. So whether or not the state's going to have the resources to enforce all of this is yet to be seen. But it's just so crazy how many unknowns there are, because they go ahead and they put in all these laws into place, right? And they say, you got to do this, you got to do that. But the funny thing is, there's no real consequences, Like I've kind of mentioned this before, but as of right now, there are no consequences to not complying with any of these new laws and regulations. And it's difficult to enforce laws when there's no consequences. Then people think, well, we can just get away with this. We don't have to really do anything if no one's going to throw us in jail or if nothing's really going to happen. But one thing that a lot of these condo associations and owners who refuse to comply are missing and not really thinking about the big picture on is, before any state regulators get involved or before there's any criminal charges or anything like that, the actual condo market, where these units are traded, bought, and sold, is going to penalize these condos before anything else. Because once a place is in non-compliance, that's going to have to be disclosed to new buyers who are wanting to purchase in the property. Once people know, and once these buildings are sort of blacklisted and people realize that, hey, this building's not really doing what they're supposed to, and they're willfully breaking the law, what's going to be the value of a unit there? Like, it's already bad enough when a building doesn't have enough money, when they're going broke, when there's a lot of construction work that needs to be done that's being delayed, that no one wants to pay for. That's already a bad situation in itself that deteriorates the value of any property, right? But then on top of that, when you compound the fact that they are breaking the law intentionally, what does it bring the value down to then? And this is why I still think that the best opportunity for buildings that are facing extreme financial hardship is to just get everybody on board to sell the property to a developer, guys. And I have no special interest in saying this. I just think it's the most logical next step, because you can't have a situation where everybody in the building refuses or doesn't have the money to pay for the necessary repairs in the building and be able to continue to operate like that. It's just not going to work. The building's going to become so bankrupt, they're going to eventually have no choice but to do that anyways. But sometimes people need to do that. Sometimes people need to kind of exhaust all of their options until they finally realize they've backed themselves into a corner to actually wake up and decide to do something about it. But by then, the problem is it could be too late. Now, the next thing that's plaguing condos, as if all of this isn't bad enough, is insurance on the buildings. In fact, I made a video, I think 2 years ago, when my building insurance practically doubled overnight, and it caused a pretty big spike in HOA dues for the building, okay? And prior to Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene hitting the state of Florida, it was actually projected that condo insurance was going to remain relatively stable or even see a small decrease moving into next year. But now that we've had these storms, all of that could be changing, because now that these storms have hit, they're kind of like waiting to see how much we have in damages, waiting to see the assessments from the public adjusters. Now they're talking about increasing rates as much as 10% from private insurance companies and as much as 15% if you're on Citizens Insurance in Florida. And I'm pretty sure our building now has Citizens because it's the only insurance company that will actually insure our building. So our insurance, last time I checked, was about $800,000 a year. So if it goes up by 15%, now we're talking about an additional $120,000 a year, pushing close to $1 million a year just in insurance for the building, guys. Prior to the major increases in insurance, we were paying $400,000 a year. So the increases are just monumental. It's funny, they give some averages here, but they're not really that accurate. for most people, because they say for a 1,000 square foot condo in Miami-Dade County, owners could be charged an extra $39 a month, or about an extra $468 a year. And for buildings with less than 300 units, an additional $34 a month. Well, that's not true, because even if you just take that at face value and say, okay, my monthly dues are only going to go up $40 a month because of insurance, there's all these other costs that go up as well. And I'm even going to share some of the details of the budget of my building later in this video for 2025, because we're getting slammed with another special assessment. Because unlike a lot of these other buildings, we are complying with the law and all these things that we have to do. And guess what? It costs an absolute fortune. And as if all that's not bad enough, if you have a mortgage on your condo, you still have to pay for your own insurance on your individual unit as well. So you have to pay for insurance with the HOA, and you have to pay for insurance on your individual unit. The only good thing is the individual unit insurance is relatively cheap with an HO6 policy, because it doesn't really cover that much. So now we have to talk about my new special assessment that we just got hit with. In fact, just about a week ago, our condo board just approved a new special assessment that's going to be going into effect in 2025. And I want to discuss this a little bit for a few different reasons, because I want people to understand the gravity of the situation and just how expensive all this can be, number one. But number two, I also want to kind of discuss the consequences of this when it comes to maybe the value of your unit, as well as what your options could be when it comes to paying for these special assessments, because it's kind of weird the way sometimes this works. To give you some perspective, when I bought my unit at the beginning of 2022, we already knew we were going to get hit with a special assessment back then. It was like $24,000 or so. And you can either pay it all up front, or you can pay it over a 5-year time frame with a little bit of interest. And back then interest rates were still very low, so we were able to secure a very cheap payment for people that didn't want to pay it all up front. And that's the route I decided to take, because the interest was so minimal. I think over 5 years you end up paying about $2,000 in interest. It really wasn't that significant. And then you don't have to fork out all the money at once, and you can use it for other investments, which is what I chose to do. But now this latest special assessment is a lot bigger than the last one. The last one was a $3.5 million special assessment, but wait for it, this next one is an $8 million special assessment, guys. Now, why so expensive? Well, because since we have to do all of the repairs and things that are necessary to keep the building in good shape, all this stuff is turning out to be far more expensive than anybody thought, because we had to do our structural integrity reserve study, and it turns out that we need more work than we anticipated, which I'm sure a lot of buildings are going to run into this situation. So now my new special assessment is going to be $54,096, okay? And check this out. They give you 3 payment options. You can either pay it all up front at the beginning of the year in January. You can pay it by 4 bi-monthly payments with no interest, 4 payments of $13,524, one in January, one in March, one in May, and one in July, and then you'd be done with it. No interest, right? Or the other option is if you want to pay 84 installments with interest, guys, then it would be a whopping $877.50 a month. Just to give you a perspective, that's pretty much what my entire HOA fee was when I bought the condo. So now people are going to be facing this sort of situation. And as you can see, not everybody is paying equal amounts, because it gets assessed based on the size of your unit. And some people have it even worse than me. People who have the largest units are looking at a $98,000 special assessment, okay? Or an extra $1,593 a month. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, Michael, you are an absolute idiot. You are a moron for hanging on to this place. You should have sold it already and moved on and bought a cheaper place. And part of me agrees with you, and part of me doesn't, because only individuals can make different decisions and assessments about their own financial life and where they live. And it's not really anybody else's decision about what I do or what I don't do. But I'm sharing what I'm doing here on the channel to give people an idea of how this works and maybe offer some insight into helping others figure out if this will be the right path for them or not. So my wife and I have been discussing this a lot ever since we have gotten notice that we're going to be charged this assessment, right? And we're kind of looking at it a couple of different ways. Well, before I get into our outlook on it, I want to just go over these payment options real quick before I forget about that. So I showed you guys there's 3 payment options, right? You can either pay all one lump sum beginning of the year, you can pay 4 interest-free payment throughout the first half of the year, or you can pay for installments, which will end up costing far more money. In fact, if we decide to do that, the special assessment would go from costing $54,000 to $73,000, almost $20,000 more. So, but here's the catch, guys. You don't have to start making these payments until 2027. In fact, May of 2027 is when these payments are supposed to start. So let's say I have the money to pay the whole thing up front, but I'm trying to make the right financial move here. And the businessman inside of me is saying, why am I going to give this condo association $54,000 up front or throughout the first 6 months of the year when I can hang on to that money for an additional 2.5 years from now and use it to invest, use it to buy more assets and get wealthier with that money. And then once the time comes to start actually making those payments, just like any other loan, I can pay it off early with no penalty, okay? What we're thinking, if we don't sell the condo before this, then we're probably going to opt for the third option to start making the payments in May of 2027. Because in my mind, it's like, what do you have to lose? You gain absolutely nothing besides peace of mind for paying the assessment off early and losing all the money now, or you can wait 2.5 years and inflation, number one, is going to erode a chunk of the value of that $73,000 that you're supposed to pay then, and also you're never going to end up paying $73,000 because I can just wait till the first payment is due or the second payment is due and just pay off the full amount then. And you're only going to be charged interest based on how many months you had the loan. If I only have the loan for 2 months, then I can pay off the loan essentially interest-free or a very small amount of interest, and I got to have a 2.5-year buffer, a window to use up that money for additional investments to enrich my own financial life along the way. So what do you think is the better decision? Obviously, it makes more sense to just wait, right? I don't see why anybody would pay this money up front unless they're just the kind of person that can't stand having any kind of bills on the back of their mind and just wants it to be over. And normally, that's how I am. But knowing that I can pay off this loan essentially interest-free either now or in 2.5 years from now, it's a no-brainer to delay it, right? Why should I pay it off now? And you have to keep in mind this as well. If you live in a building where something like this happens to you and you get hit with a major special assessment like this, once it's passed, like it just did, it passed in my building, I'm essentially on the hook now for this $54,000. So say, you know what, I don't want to pay this, I don't want to deal with this anymore, I'm going to sell my condo. Well, that assessment needs to be paid at the closing table no matter what now. So even though the money's not even due yet, it's on the books that it will be due, and it needs to be settled at closing moving forward. So now instantly, whether or not I decide to sell this condo or stay, it kind of reduces the value of my unit by $54,000 or some variation of that amount, because somebody has to pay for that, whether it's me, the new buyer, or a combination of both of us, however we decide to split it, is going to be responsible for that $54,000, because that's how special assessments work. When there's a pending special assessment, it needs to be paid at closing. And now that there is one, that will have to happen. But even more than that, the question is, should you keep the condo? Are you going to stay in this place, Michael? Because if you do, you must be insane, right? Well, like I said earlier, my wife and I have been discussing this, and we're kind of looking at this 2 ways. Like, no, one, we could sell and take what we can get for the place and have it be somebody else's problem and split the assessment or even pay it at closing and just be done with it, right? Move somewhere else, move to a house somewhere in northern Florida and be done with it. But are you really done with it? Because the thing is, as a homeowner, guys, you're never done with it. That's how it works, okay? Being a homeowner, no matter what type of home you own, is expensive, especially in the state of Florida, where we have all types of climate issues that we have to deal with. Right now, dealing with living in an oceanfront condo that's very expensive to maintain, because any building that's sitting on the beach costs a lot of money to keep standing up. If I move to a house in Florida, initially my costs might go down, but then I'm going to have to face other maintenance issues in the future, like putting on a new roof, new HVAC system, landscaping. If there's a hurricane or flood that causes a major amount of damage, that can be an unknown amount that you need to pay for, and unexpectedly on top of that. So the way we kind of look at it is, if we kind of run away from this problem, you're just kind of running away from one problem and potentially running into another problem, because you don't really ever know what you're getting yourself into with a new property until you've owned it for a while. The other option is we can just stay put and swallow the special assessment and not have to worry about it for 2.5 more years, save up the money, make other investments in the meantime, and pay it off whenever the time comes. Whenever 2027 rolls around and the payments start rolling in, then we have the money to just pay it off and not have to worry about it. But there are other considerations as well, as like the quality of life while the work is going on. In fact, if the work gets to be too disruptive, I'm actually planning on maybe renting the place out and leaving while it's going on and moving somewhere else in the meantime, if we decide to keep it and don't sell. But I'll tell you what, one realization that we're both having from this is really nowhere's perfect, guys. We could move somewhere cheaper, but how long will it be cheaper for until the next problem comes up? Is it going to cost, $54,000 in one shot? Probably not. But maintenance adds up over time, and when it comes to the interior of the condo, there's nothing you really have to do unless you want to remodel or redecorate, things like that that are not necessary but are, optional. And there's also other things that we take into consideration, like we love living on the beach, we love our neighborhood, we have friends there, we have history in the building, it's where my wife and I met. So there's a lot of other things to take into consideration as well, and we don't know what we're going to do yet, because money is only one of the concerns. There's other things to decide here besides just the money. And it's one of those situations like, where is the grass greener? Or maybe it's not greener anywhere, because no matter where you go, you're going to face different problems. If I decide to move here to California, it will cost me even more than staying at this condo in Florida. So I don't know exactly what we're going to do, but of course I'll keep you guys updated on the channel what we decide. But one other thing I want to discuss in this video is the inventory situation with condos and how all of this is affecting condos so far. And right now, if we look at the current level of inventory in Florida, we pretty much are back to pre-pandemic levels. Okay, going back to the beginning of 2020, there was about 55,000 condos for sale in the state, and fast forward to September 2024, there's about 60,000 condos for sale, so slightly above pre-pandemic levels. And this might look like, well, everybody's trying to bail and sell now due to all of this situation. But if we zoom out and look further back, what happened going all the way back to the housing crash in 2008, it tells a much different story about condos. Because back then, there was about 142,000 condos for sale, which is more than double what we have now. And I vividly remember this, where we had dozens, if not over 100 new construction buildings either being built or newly built in Miami, all at the same time, all trying to sell, all competing with a ton of foreclosures and short sales in existing buildings as well. So the inventory for these condos was immense, as you can see. And the market back then was just completely flooded with inventory, and there was close to 3 years of inventory for just condos in Miami. So are we going to go back to those times where we have that much inventory because of this condo crisis? I don't know, but When we look at this chart, we can see we're pretty far away from those times, at least so far. That might change though going into 2026 because many buildings are still getting away with not having to pay the full reserve amount if they pass their yearly budget before the end of this year. It's kind of like one last little get out of jail free card until the hammer really drops. But of course, I'll keep you guys posted on all of it. I'll keep you posted on what we decide. You know, you can say whatever you want about us and think we're stupid or whatever, but we have our reasons just like everybody else has reasons to do things in life. And I feel like no matter what we decide to do, it's going to be the right decision for us. So that's the first thing. But also, I'll keep you posted on what's going on with all of this situation happening with these condos, because it is definitely going to be interesting to see where this goes in the future. And I almost want to just do this to be a guinea pig for the channel, to just show you guys, you know, what can potentially happen and kind of be the sacrificial lamb on all of this. But I don't know if I'm willing to go that far with it or not. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.